All of you are much more familiar with Malabar as a region than I am, because I have grown up not ever in Malabar. My growing up has been on the across North India much more than anything else. So it is actually one of the strange twists of fate, destiny, maybe just stubbornness that got me into maritime history and then into the peninsular regions of India. And so, Malabar culture and Malabar heritage. One thing that has to be remembered all through is that Malabar culture and heritage, while distinctive, is not different in many ways from peninsular India. Because Malabar, peninsular India projects into the Indian Ocean. And before the age of steamships, India was the logical point where every ship came. And when you came from West Asia, then you came to the West Coast. When you went to Southeast Asia, you went past Malabar and into Southeast Asia. So geographically, India has always been a symbiosis of a whole lot of cultures, not just one, but all kinds of them. And so we begin our journey into Malabar culture actually with the Roman Empire. Back in the 3rd, 2nd, 1st centuries BC, that's when we start talking about Malabar. And one of the earliest maps of the world that was built, that was drawn in about the 2nd century AD, shows Kochi and Calicut. It shows Malabar. It is not a map that you would ever recognize today because it's flat. It's one long vertical thing, and it's just on a plane like that. It looks like a ruler. It's called the Tabula Peuterangiana, and that shows Malabar, and it shows, well, geographically inaccurate, but it shows off the coast of Kerala, it shows the island of what in Greek records is called Taprobane, which is Sri Lanka. So we have a map which shows the Indian coast, Malabar, and Sri Lanka. Totally inaccurate in terms of geography, but fascinating in that it is the first time we talk of a region called India. And then there is a whole lot. Before and after, there is a whole lot. One of my favorite stories about India comes from the Greek historian Herodotus. He's the first to talk about India's wealth and India's gold. Here in Malabar, we're used to talking about gold all the time here in Kerala. Gold is a very important item over here of celebration, of trade, a display of wealth. It's gold. And Herodotus, the historian, is the first to talk about this because he says that between the land of Persia and the land of India lies the great gold-bearing desert. And the Indians are the only people in the world who know how to ride the great gold-digging ants that go into the desert. And he says that these ants are the size of horses, and Indians can sit on their backs and go into the desert, and the ants will just dig out the gold. So all Indians have to do is pick up the gold and bring it back and sell it. So here's your first legendary story about India. So India as a land of legends. This changed, well, this was added to by two very important things. One, primarily in and around Malabar, and one all over India. The item in and around Malabar is pepper. We're all comfortable with milaha. And that is our prime export. The other is cotton cloth. India's cotton cloth is famous. Earliest traces of India's cotton cloth have been found in Africa, and they date back to about 2000 BC. So it's from that time onwards that we have our cloth. So our culture is rooted in these two tangible things, cloth and pepper. Linked to that are all kinds of other things. While we have cloth and pepper, remember that we also have food, all kinds of food. Something that is distinctive to Malabar cuisine is coconuts. We can't think of any food without some kind of coconut in it. Why coconuts? They grow wild on this tip of the peninsula. So the coast of Malabar and the coast of Tamil Nadu is definitely coconut. But there's something else. There is also betel nut, supari that we say. And that is, again, South Kerala and South Tamil Nadu, as well as Sri Lanka. So when we talk of Malabar, we aren't talking of the present-day state of Kerala. We are talking of a peninsular history which includes present-day Malabar, present-day Kerala, present-day Tamil Nadu, and present-day Sri Lanka. All these give you the unit which is called differently. It's called Malabar, it's called South India. In earliest records, it is called Tamilaham. There are a whole lot of words, but you're basically talking about this geographical unit. Going beyond that, when we look at trade, the first clear reference we get to trade to the Malabar region comes from the Roman records. There is this anonymous text written in the 1st century AD, which talks of the great port of Muziris. Today, Muziris has been identified as being Kodungalur, Kranganur, and the excavations are going on at Pattanam. And in these excavations, what has been found is material made in the Roman Empire. Remember, there isn't a direct trade. So it's coming across the Mediterranean into Egypt, then from the Red Sea, and from Aden into here. And if it comes to Aden, in the age of sail, that is, for much of the world's history, there is a direct wind connection from Aden to, depending on the time of the year. For instance, I was told by some of the fishermen that if you leave Aden in March, around the 15th of March, you'll get to the coast of Gujarat. If you leave Aden around the 1st of March, you will come to either Kochi or Calicut. And if you leave Aden after the 15th of March, then it's trouble because you'll get stuck in the winds that are beginning to blow in. So there is a connection. Remember, there is a continuity of that connection. Remember the Kerala connection with West Asia. This is historically rooted. Much more than anything else, nobody looks at these historical connections. But Muziris is your starting point. Muziris is mentioned also in Tamil poetry as the great port from where the word that is used is Yavana ships. Yavana is the Indianization of the word Ionian Sea. The Greek Sea, Ionian Sea, is turned into Yavana in the Indian records. So they come with these Yavana ships, and it says, the poetry says, that it comes with jars of wine and with gold, and they go back laden with pearls, because you've got the pearl fishery, Mannar, the Gulf of Mannar is the pearl fishery. It goes back with cloth, pepper, and with pearls. So look at the richness of the exports that India is doing. And much of this is going out from 3 major ports. Muziris, that's Pattanam, Poduka, which is Pondicherry, and probably a place called Barigaza, which is Bharuch in Gujarat. This is your peninsular connection. Okay? Then, who traded? Now, that's where we get into the culture of Malabar. Malabar has always been a place of cultural pluralism. Whole lot of people, all kinds of religions, different parts of the world, all represented here. Among the first groups that came and settled in Malabar were the St. Thomas Christians. They come in, probably for a long time it was dismissed as legend, but increasingly archaeological excavations and textual analysis of the books in the Vatican Library in particular are proving that St. Thomas actually did come to India and actually did die here in India. So the St. Thomas Christians are your first group. Today it is said that there are 7 groups of Christians, all of whom are linked to the St. Thomas Christians. And the first travel account from India outwards is written in the 1770s in Malayalam. It is the Vartamana Pustakam, which is written by one of the groups of the Marthoma Christians who go to meet the Pope and to get recognition as Christians acknowledged by the Pope. This is the first that comes up in our textual sources. Now, this literature about the St. Thomas Christian was for many, many years just ignored because they said nothing of the sort. This is only oral. It's just people talking without any basis in reality. Because all of the St. Thomas accounts come from oral traditions. So there's a series which is called the Padal, the songs. But these songs today are being looked at, and we find references to so many of the ports of Malabar. Now they mention Kodungalur, Karanganur, sometimes called Muyirikode, Muziris. Then there is mention of Kollam, there is mention of Alapura, there is mention of Kochi. All of these are the ports of the Malabar region. And these are the areas where the St. Thomas Christians first come in. So there is a link between the songs, which is a community memory, and the places where they stay. That's one more region. Second major group to come into Malabar were more or less the same time, the Jews and the Muslims. The Jews come in again around the same time as the St. Thomas Christians are coming in. Around the 1st, 2nd century AD is when the Jews start coming in. But they trade a lot more to India from about the 10th century onwards. So between the 10th and the 15th, we have this whole range of, we all know, for instance, that Kochi has a Jewish street. So the Jews are part of this. And the Jews are linked to the trade to West Asia because they are linked to the court of Baghdad and to the court of Yemen. And through Yemen and Baghdad, they trade to the Mediterranean world. So goods from Malabar go into the Mediterranean world via the Jewish traders. Third major group to come into India is Malabar again, is Islam. As a religious group, they come in. Shortly after Islam comes up as a religion, Islam comes into Kerala first. So 8th century onwards, we have Muslims in Kerala. And the Muslims link us to yet another network, a network which comes from the south of Arabia, the area of the south which is called the Hadramut. So they are called the Hadrami merchants. They come in, and linked to this is your richness of food, the richness of language, the richness of music. We had this performance just now, and some of the music that was performed here was very similar to music that I have heard from the Sufis in Indonesia. So you've got the music which has been transcending worlds. So there's all kinds of cultural connections. But the basis of all of this connection is finally trade. And so I'll move to the second part, culture and trade. Now, culture, we think of culture as being mostly performance. But culture is rooted in things. This is where you start culture from, okay? Or this. What is this? This is paper. Where does paper come from? China? Egypt? All of these? But typical of paper in India, and particularly in Malabar and in Tamil Nadu, is not paper as we know it as paper. It is bark. The bark of trees or palm leaf. Both these one finds all over the place. Even today, despite environmental damage, we find bark and trees all over the place along the coast. So you write on that. How do you write on that? And here's a record from West Asia, which says that the people of the south of India have mastered the art of writing on leaf with a stick. And it's one long pointed, all of you are tech savvy people. You use mobiles with the stylus. All of you? I haven't learned how to do that yet, but I'm sure all of you do. Now, that stylus is exactly the same tool that was used to write on paper. It's one long, thin stick, which is sharpened point, which you hold not like a pen like this, but you hold like this, and you write on it. So we have examples of script, which are called vatteluthu, the round writing. So vatteluthu is what we have. Vatteluthu has developed separately into the Malayalam script and into the Tamil script. So we've got two different languages that come up over here. Vatteluthu is still very much part of the Malayalam script because many of the letters are formed in a circular fashion. Even today, you tend to write I was looking at some of the signboards outside. Your curve, for instance, is written like that. And it's a very curved kind of a system. All of this is part of the culture. How does this develop? This develops through trade. It is almost always, while we talk about Brahmins having a monopoly of knowledge, the fact is that writing spreads because of the need to maintain records. So there are two major groups that maintain records. One is the political power. They need a record of revenue. The other is the merchant, who need a record of what profits they are making and what losses they are making. So writing comes from these two sources. Very often, this is divided in terms of sacred language and mundane language or profane language. Perhaps one of the best examples of that we find is in Maharashtra, where there is a script called the Modi script, in which accounts were written, and a different language in which all the texts are written. The language is Marathi, but the script is different. So, how did the merchants write? Now, this is something which maybe some of you will go on to look at in Malabar. Many of these are still palm leaf accounts which have not been looked at. Most people don't know the script. Many people who can read the script don't know enough Malayalam to be able to understand the script. And it isn't only Malayalam. It is Malayalam, Tamil, Arabic, Swahili, all of these languages, and a little bit of Persian. So you need multiple languages, but that's your next connection to trade. Who traded? As I said, you've got the Jews, you've got the Christians, you've got the Turks, you've got the Arabs, and of course, you've got the Indian merchants. Chettis, Gujaratis, they used to be called Malabari. And Malabari is a term which is applied to everybody. Now, one of the crucial things about Kerala is that there has been a long established system of ownership of land and rights with land. And so kings often could not tax the land or get any revenue from land, which meant that the kings fostered and promoted trade in order to get more revenue. So we have the Cheras, the Cheraman Perumal, who develops the port of Kollam. So there is a very clear connection between the Kollam development and with the Cheras. 13th century, when the Chera kingdom splinters, that's when you start getting a whole lot of smaller. So not so much Kodungalur, but you get Kochi, Thiruvananthapuram, and Calicut. Of these, Calicut becomes very important for the trade to the West Asian worlds and to the Red Sea and to the Persian Gulf. The Calicut ruler comes to be called the Samudri Raja. And that, when the Portuguese come, they turn it into the Zamorin. You're all more familiar with the Zamorin than I am. So that is the Zamorin, the ruler of the sea. Then Kannur, the Ali Rajas of Kannur, questioned his right to be called the Lords of the Sea. And so there is a fight between the Ali Rajas and with Calicut, where the contest is not just over control of trade, it's also who has the right to be called the Lord of the Sea. Calicut initially wins, so Calicut remains the Zamorin, and Kannur remains the Ali Rajas. But you've got a whole lot. And it is into this world that the Portuguese come. We all know about the Portuguese Vasco da Gama coming first of all to Malabar. What most people don't remember is that when Vasco da Gama came, he has in his letters, he has this account which says that I had with me a Moor from Aden who guided us across to the coast of Malabar. And when we landed, we were not permitted to set foot on the land. We had to stay on board the ship. Then our Moor pilot, Moor being the word that they used for the Muslim, which itself comes from Morocco, because the first Muslims they really had contact with were the Muslims of Morocco. So the word is Moor. For the English, Othello the Moor, which is where the Moor comes in. So they call them the Moors. And the Moors do not permit us to land. And they are very surprised later when they say that, Vasco da Gama says, but the ruler of this land welcomes all people. He does not care what religion they have, and they are aware of us as Christians. So he doesn't expect them to know Christians. But even more surprising to him was that when he was finally allowed to land, he was assigned an interpreter who spoke to him first in apparently Malayalam, second, he spoke to him in Hebrew, and third, in Latin. So he goes back and he says, there are people here who still speak Hebrew and Latin, which we in Europe have forgotten. So there's a memory that's happening, and there is a language. Much later, there is this Englishman, Sir Thomas Roe, who goes to the court of Jahangir. And he speaks only English. Being a good Englishman, speaks only English and no other language. And when he has to talk to Jahangir, he speaks to the Italian ambassador in English. The Italian ambassador translates it into Persian, and the Persian ambassador is the one who reports to the king. 3-language translation. This is also part of Malabar. Hebrew, Latin, Arabic, Malayalam. All of these are universally spoken. Now, embedded in this is a history of contact. What are the areas with whom all of them are most in touch? The Arabian Sea, just as a matter of tangential interest, the Arabian Sea was never the Arabian Sea. It is a term that has been given by the Portuguese because they called it the Arab-controlled sea. Otherwise, in Latin records, it was called the Erythraean Sea, which means a red-colored sea. And in Arab records, it is called the Green Ocean. Before the monsoon, have you seen the color of the ocean? It's got a greenish tinge to it. So it is called the Leek Green Sea. And the Bay of Bengal is never the Bay of Bengal. It is called the Behre Harkal or the Behre Harkand. Harkal, Harikela, is the first kingdom that comes up in Bengal, in the Bengal Delta, and controls that. So it's the Behre Harkal. All of these are words. This becomes the Gulf of the Bengal only in Portuguese accounts. So what we use today as our standard words are European-influenced words. They are not part of this. Malabari accounts, unfortunately, have not been looked at enough to be able to understand what historically the Malabari people referred to the Arabian Sea. We don't know the terminology. We do know from Tamil records that the Bay of Bengal is almost invariably called the Chola Seas because it's the Shoranada that really goes into the Bay of Bengal, so they call the Chola Seas. But we don't have something done from Malabar as yet. Dr. Noon, that's something that maybe you could look at as well. But these are all areas that need to be looked at. Then we have groups. Now, these groups of merchant organizations are primarily in Calicut and in Kochi. There is one group which is called the Anjavannam, the 5 traders. These 5 traders are those who do not live full-time in India. They might spend one season here, but they are basically what we would today call foreigners. So included in the Anjavanam are Arabs. Rumi, the word is often called Rumi. Rumi is traders from Turkey, because the old word for the Roman Empire was Rum, and when the Roman Empire collapsed, the Eastern Roman Empire, which was the Turkey area, continued, Byzantine and Turkey continued. So in India, they're still called Rumi. So the Rumi are there. So you've got the Arab, the Rumi, the Jew, the Hadrami, and those from Southeast Asia. These are your 5 groups, all of them coming to Kochi and to Calicut. To them is included one more in the 13th century, the Chinese. The first diplomatic mission that goes to China is sent by the Chola king, because after the Chola king attacks and defeats the king of Srivijaya, which is Indonesia, Kedah, he defeats that king. So he sends a diplomatic mission to the Chinese emperor. That is reciprocated. But then after that, in 1282 thereabouts, the king of Kochi sends a mission to Kublai Khan's court in Peking. And in 1283, we have the first mission, reciprocal mission, of a Chinese embassy coming to Kochi. And Kochi and Calicut are where today a major tourist attraction are the Chinese fishing nets. This happens in 1283. That's your tangible connection. And why Calicut? Because Calicut and Kochi, because these are the places where you can get the goods of both West and East. So you get all the material from Arabia and the Persian Gulf coming here. You get all the material available in India in these markets, and you get the material from the South China Seas, Indonesia, Burma, all of them also come here. And remember also that all of these are connected by sea, by land, by language, and by religion. So you have multiple cultural connections underwritten by a solid core of economics, the movement of goods, materials, of trade across the Indian Ocean world. Thank you.